Love does not always come easily, especially when it goes against age-old tradition and familial pressure. Saving Face, the directorial debut of Alice Wu, is a moving and sensitive examination of the complexities of love, identity, and cultural tradition. A young Chinese-American surgeon, Wilhelmina Will Pang, finds herself torn between her budding romance with a charismatic dancer, Vivien, and the pressures of her conservative mother, Gao, who is hiding a shocking secret of her own. As both women struggle with their truths, they embark on a journey of self-discovery, acceptance, and ultimately, love. The movie starts in New York City, where Will Pang, Michelle Krusiek, a successful surgeon, aged 28, lives her life with exactness and discipline. She attends a traditional Friday night gathering in Flushing, Queens, where her widowed mother, Gao, Joan Chen, and the Chinese-American community try to match her with appropriate men. Will, however, is not too keen on all this matchmaking business, harboring as she does a secret she dare not tell. She is in love with a woman. The hospital halls are sterile and alive with the hum of activity, the constant rush of nurses and doctors rushing from patient to patient. Will moves through this world as an anchor, her grounded presence a salve to the patients she treats. She is professional in her work, always doing her best to maintain the professional distance that is necessary for one in her position. But beneath her calm surface, a storm brews, one of longing, confusion, and the weight of a life that has been defined by the demands of others. It is on one of these hectic shifts that she first encounters Vivien. Vivien is everything that Will is not, assertive, unapologetically herself, and liberated. She is the attention-getter in the crowd, pulling people towards her with the quiet power and the fluid motion. She is the boss's daughter, and has always been on the periphery of Will's existence, someone who has belonged to the realm of expectation and entitlement that Will never came close to. Today is different, however. When Vivien visits the hospital to visit her father, she catches Will's eyes across the hallway. It's fleeting, a glance, nothing more, but in that instant, something shifts. There is a jolt, a silent recognition of something unspoken. Vivien, with her radiant smile and effortless charm, approaches Will, and for the first time, Will feels herself falter. It's a simple greeting, nothing more than a polite exchange of words, but the chemistry between them is undeniable. Vivien's presence is like a breath of fresh air, a burst of light in the otherwise mundane routine of Will's day. "I've heard so much about you," Vivien says, her voice soft but confident. Will's heart skips a beat. She is not used to being gazed at in that way, let alone by someone as self-assured and poised as Vivien. She smiles awkwardly, unsure of what to say. "Well, I've heard about you too," Will says, trying to sound casual, but the words hang her down. Vivien's eyes lock onto Will's, holding them for just a fraction of a second longer than necessary. It's subtle, so subtle indeed that Will can't be certain she didn't imagine it. But the shape of Vivien's lips into a knowing smile tells her exactly. From then on, their interactions are a secret dance. Vivien finds excuses to go to the hospital more often, always on the guise of a quick visit to her father. But each time, she manages to steal a few precious moments with Will. They talk about work, life, everything and nothing special. It's in these passing moments, when their fingers brush together briefly in passing, when their eyes meet across the room, that the foundations for something more begin to form. Will resists at first. She doesn't know what she's feeling, uncertain of how to handle the pull between them. There are too many reasons that she shouldn't be doing this, too many reasons that she should simply walk away. The most significant of all of those reasons is the fear of what her mother will say. Gao has never had a moment's doubt that Will has to live a certain life, marry a man, have children, have the markers of a traditional life. But there's no denying Vivien's allure, her sense of humor, her intellect, the way she carries herself. It all draws Will in like a magnet, and the more time they spend together, the harder it is for Will to ignore the feelings that are quietly taking root inside of her. One evening, as the hospital begins to wind down, Vivien and Will find themselves alone in the break room. The soft hum of the fluorescent lights hangs between them, and the air appears to throb with something unspoken. Vivien is leaning back against the counter, sipping her coffee with a look of casualness, but there's something in the way she's looking at Will, something that makes Will's heart race. "You know," Vivien whispers, "I didn't expect to meet someone like you here." Will tilts her head, her heart pounding in her chest. "Someone like me?" she says, trying to sound casual. "Someone who would make me want to stay longer," Vivien replies, her voice husky and teasing. There's a silence, the weight of her words hanging in the air. Will can hear her breath catch in her throat, and she quickly turns away, trying to steady her nerves. I shouldn't," Will begins, but her voice fades off, not knowing what she even means. Vivien steps closer, her presence overwhelming and comforting all at once. She places a hand on Will's arm, and the warmth of her touch sends a jolt through Will's body. "You don't have to be afraid," Vivien murmurs, her gaze soft yet intense. "I'm not going anywhere." And just like that, the walls Will has so carefully constructed around her heart begin to crumble. Their affair, in its early days, is fragile, a delicate balance of stolen moments and repressed feelings. Each touch, each glance, feels as though it could shatter under the weight of their secret. But in these moments, Will allows herself to feel something she has not felt in years: desire. But the secrecy has its cost. Every moment they share is clouded by the fear of being found out, of the consequences they both know are waiting just around the corner. Vivien, confident and assertive as she is, seems to take it in her stride. But Will is torn between what she wants and what she thinks she's supposed to want. And yet, still, the moments remain. The late-night walks in the park after working late, the shared coffees during hospital break room time, the lingering glances when they must be separated. Through the passing of the day, the connection between them becomes stronger. So too does Will's inner conflict. She wants Vivien, but is in fear of the consequences. Vivien is clearly willing to push those boundaries. She's been brave before, but Will wonders if she can be this time. With every new day, it becomes harder for Will to resist keeping her eyes away from what is bubbling between them. There is one moment, one fleeting, heart-stopping moment, when their lips nearly touch, the air thick with tension. But Will springs back, the weight of her fears crashing against her like a wave. But still, Vivien does not push. She bides her time, understanding the path they're walking won't be easy. That it will take time to break down the walls she struggled with Will to establish around his heart. That every little gesture, every gentle word continues to erode the defenses Will's built up around hers over years. It's not long before Will realizes that what they have is more than a fleeting infatuation. It's something real, something that it's worth fighting for. And though the road ahead of them is fraught with peril, she knows that she can't leave this chance at love behind. The secret she holds is tenuous, yet it is precious, and to Will, it is the beginning of something that will change her life forever. Will's world is turned upside down when her mother, Gao, appears on her doorstep one night with news that astonishes her. She is pregnant. Worse, she refuses to identify the father. Rejected by her own parents for breaking convention, Gao has nowhere to go. Will is forced to provide her with refuge, throwing her already chaotic life into chaos. Will is caught between duty, love, and fear. At the hospital, her days turn into a blur of constant rounds of patients, night shifts, and fleeting moments of solitude where she can barely breathe. but the weight she carries extends far beyond the cold confines of her workspace. At home, there are unspoken words and unfulfilled expectations. Her mother Gao still ruling her life, determining whom she is to love and how she is to live. Gao, whose own scandalous affair has put her under constant scrutiny, never gives up on trying to set Will up with a parade of suitable Chinese bachelors. Each dinner, each coerced conversation, is an exhausting pretend session for Will, who works hard to suppress the bitterness roiling beneath her. Why should her mother, condemned in turn by the same people she desperately pleases, refuse still to want to hear Will's truth? It is overwhelming hypocrisy, but Will remains silent. No, she indulges them instead, smiling and even inclining her head as her conscience aches for another. Vivien, bright and unchecked, is Will's opposite to the constraints of his life. She is assured, bold, and not caring to be somebody's secret. Her love for Will is true, smoking, all-consumingly, but she will not live in shadows. At first, she forgives, understanding the deeply instilled fears holding Will back. But frustration seeps in through the years. She wants to be seen, heard, to be loved openly, and not merely in a bedroom's hush. Their moments together are full of stolen kisses, whispered secrets, and laughter, but beneath it all is tension. Vivien pushes Will to stand up, to be himself, but Will is terrified. Standing up to her mother's disapproval, standing up to the dismayed murmurs of their community, is too much. She is torn between the love she wants and the fear of losing everything she has ever known. The cracks in their relationship grow with each argument. Each instance Will stalls when Vivien reaches for his hand on the street. Each time she distances herself at the threat of being discovered. Love is not a burden to be worn, yet to Will it is a constant tug between desire and duty. And for Vivien, love is not something to be battled for. It just has to be. As the world around them collapses in, Will must make a decision. Keep living in terror or risk everything for the love she knows is true. But in a world where tradition and expectation battle with the need for freedom, choosing oneself is never easy. The night was to have been a celebration. The old family reunion, a visit home, a celebration of heritage, and a holding on to the family bonds that had been so lovingly nurtured over the years. But for Will, every smile, every polite conversation was a weight crushing her chest. Entering the huge banquet hall, the people she knew so well greeted her with open arms, but in her heart there was no joy. The air was thick with expectation. Her mother, Gao, had pushed her to attend, reminding her that image was everything. Tonight, Will wasn't merely a daughter. She was an icon, a member of the idealized family. And then there was the man, Liu, a young businessman with a winning smile and carefully constructed persona. Gao had been praising him to Will for weeks, always talking about his accomplishments, his background, and above all, his potential as a suitor for Will. As the night wore on, Gao's pressure grew. It was clear that she wanted Will to play her role, to recite the script they had written for her years before. "Will, come, dance with Liu," urged Gao, the tension vibrating through her words a little in that urgent kind of way. Will hesitated, the constriction growing within her chest. Her entire body recoiled to say no, yet she felt the disapproval in her mother already settling onto her. Deep breathing into relaxation, Will resigned herself and glided across to the dance floor with Liu, her legs jerky and awkward. But what hurt the most was not the phony smile plastered on her face or the touch of a man she barely knew on her back. It was having the knowledge that Vivien stood in the background, observing. The look in her eyes, disappointment, betrayal, heartbreak, could not be dismissed. Vivien stood in the corner, arms crossed tightly over her chest, lips pursed into a thin line. Their eyes met for an instant, but in that instant, Will saw it all. how they loved each other, now tainted by secrets burdening them, the trust Will had broken unknowingly. The music kept on going as Will's head worked overtime, her heart aching with each turn she revealed to Liu. She knew she had crossed the line. She had deceived the one she loved best, the one who had stayed for her when the world was too brutal. Vivien was always the one who insisted on honesty, on openness, on love that dared to stand strong in the light. But Will, mired in the shadows of her family's expectations, had not been strong enough. The evening passed in a blur. The forced guffaws, the compulsory small talk, the stare that didn't see the true Will. She existed within a sea of unspoken truths. And when the party finally disbanded, Will tried to fade into the background, hoping to be left alone. But Vivien stepped in her way and surprised her. "Will?" Vivian's voice trembled with emotion, pure and unfiltered. "We need to talk." They stepped out, away from the noise and the clinking glasses, into the cold of night. The city lights shone like distant stars, but the warmth of night had long since departed. Vivian's eyes were filled with pain, the love that had burned so brightly now diminished by the magnitude of the circumstances. "I can't do this anymore," Vivien breathed. "I can't keep hiding. I won't. I want someone who is going to be with me in public. Someone who's not afraid to be with me, out where everyone can see. I won't be your secret anymore, Will. Not when you're so clearly ready to give me up for them." Will's heart shattered at the words. Vivien was right. She had lived in secret, too scared to battle for their love, too scared of what others would say. But fear had always been too powerful. Her mother's influence, society's expectations, the desire to maintain a life she knew and secure, it had all been greater than the love she felt for Vivien. "I didn't mean to hurt you," Will said, her voice breaking. I don't know how to get out. I don't know how to get them to believe the truth. If I lose them, I lose everything I've ever known. I can't." "You're not losing everything," Vivien interrupted, her voice firmer now, though still wounded. "You're gaining yourself, but you have to choose. You can't be in two worlds forever. And if you choose them, if you choose the life they've planned out for you, then I can't be a part of it. Not anymore." The silence between them was suffocating. Will's chest tightened, her brain replaying what could have been. Vivian's words echoed in her mind, each one a cut to the heart. She couldn't fault Vivien for going. She'd stayed as long as she had. And now she had a choice. "I'm sorry," Will breathed, finding it difficult to catch her breath over the boulder of grief wedged in her throat. I can't pick you." Slowly, Vivien nodded, tears glistening behind her eyes too. Slowly, she took steps away from Will, every movement controlled, firm. Will remained rooted to the spot, letting Vivien leave him, losing part of himself in the darkness. As the door closed behind her, the silence enveloped Will like a heavy blanket. She was alone, trapped in a cage of her own making. But her mother's voice soon called out from behind her, sharp and urgent. "You've made the right choice, Will," Gao said, stepping into the room, her eyes gleaming with satisfaction. "You've chosen the future, the family. It's the only way." But Will wasn't sure anymore. Across the city, in a dingy corner of existence, so too was Gao at a crossroads. She sat opposite an unknown, a man whose presence had disturbed her for months. Theirs, a union born in stealth and stolen moments, was now irrevocable. The truth of her wants, the weight of her own forbidden love, now crashed down on her. She could no longer deny it. Her lover too had embodied the sort of life she would have liked to have had, free, with no weight of society bearing down on her. But the same fear that had imprisoned Will had imprisoned her as well. She had the same choice to make: remain living a lie or risk losing everything they had achieved to pursue a love that felt real, regardless of the price. And thus the mother and the daughter, in their own words, were compelled to confront reality, the agonizing, beautiful reality that would define the rest of their lives. Gao has been living in the shadow of expectation for too long, restrained by the rigid traditions of her people. But today, in front of her parents, she knows she can no longer live a shame-bound life. The secret is out. She is expecting, and the father of her unborn child is none other than Mr. Cho, a nice but much older man who society deems unsuitable for her. The weight of judgment from their society rested on her shoulders like a storm cloud, but Gao has made up her mind. Her parents are shocked at first. Her hard, stubborn father is unable to grasp how his adult daughter has brought such shame upon the family. Her mother, ever the enforcer of tradition, is no less intractable. The voices of the ancients seem to move about the room, their disapproval whispered. But Gao, for the first time in her life, remains resolute. She does not try to defend what she has done or beg their forgiveness. She will not move, not ever. Rather, she stands firm, unshakable in her truth. She informs them that love is not governed by status, age, or the strict lines others draw. Love, real love, is about connection, about living for joy rather than fear. And if they cannot grasp that, then she will go on alone. Her words discomfit them, causing them to see the bitter reality. They have been so worried about appearances and upholding expectations that they have forgotten what truly matters. Slowly, their animosity mellows. Love, in any event, has already defied their rules. They may either hold on to their pride and lose their daughter forever, or they may open their hearts and embrace the family she is trying to create. In the end, love wins. They welcome Mr. Cho in, and by welcoming him in, they automatically set a precedent that Will cannot help but emulate. As Will watches her mother reclaim her life, something in her shifts. She has been so afraid of disappointing her mother, afraid of what others would say, afraid of jumping into the unknown. But now, seeing Gao's bravery, she realizes that love is not something to hide. It is something to live, to keep close, to yell from the rooftops. She cannot lose Vivien. Her own heart pounding, Will races down the city's crowded streets to the ballet theatre. She understands where Vivien will be, at work before people, lost within the enchantment of her ballet. There's no time to waste. Too much time had been wasted putting it off. Within the opulent theatre, the play is already in progress. The stage glows warmly, sending an otherworldly light across Vivien as she glides, every movement intentional, every smile charged with feeling. Will remains at the rear of the auditorium, panting, her heart pounding, and then, without deliberation, she takes a step forward. The performance freezes, suspended in air between movements. That's when Will comes down the aisle, her voice shushing the audience. "Vivien!" Eyes turn. Whispers ripple through the crowd, but Will doesn't care a fig. For the first time ever, she isn't concerned who is watching, who is judging. She just cares about the woman on stage. Vivien stands unmoving, eyes wide with shock. "I love you," Will says to him, her voice firm and unbreakable. "I don't want to be in the closet anymore. I don't care what people think. I just know I want to be with you." The audience is silent, watching, transfixed, as if they themselves are witnessing something remarkable and beautiful unfolding before their eyes. Will holds her breath, hoping. For a moment, Vivien doesn't budge. Then, very slowly, a smile spreads over her lips. The uncertainty, the fear, the pain of the last weeks fade away. She advances, her steps as smooth as they are firm. And then, in broad daylight in front of everyone, she embraces Will. The audience claps, but for Will and Vivien, the world has narrowed down to just them. This is their moment, a moment of freedom, of truth, of love, overcoming fear. As the curtain falls on the play, their new life starts, one where they don't have to be in secret anymore, where love is no longer something to be hidden, but something to be embraced. Will has finally gained the courage and, in the process, has found her bliss. And for the first time in her life, she really believes that love, when selected wholly and in fearlessness, can conquer everything. The night air is cool, with the soft hum of the city as Vivian and Will step out of the theatre. The applause still rings in Will's ears, but none of it matters as much as the warmth of Vivian's hand in hers. For the first time, they are not hiding. For too long, Will had lived her life in careful calculation, measuring obligation and personal desire, working under the strain of expectations, and fearing the consequences of stepping outside the lines her family and society had drawn for her. But tonight, all that was changed. The moment she stood on that stage, declaring her love for Vivien to strangers, she shattered the invisible chains that had bound her for so long. Vivien gazes at Will, a soft stretch of a smile on her face. There is no doubt now, no hint of uncertainty in her eyes. She had given Will a choice, and Will had chosen her, totally, fearlessly. They walk the quiet streets, their hands clasped together, as if making up for all the times they had to pull away for fear of being caught. The world has not changed overnight, and there will always be whispers, always be others who do not agree, but Will no longer cares. She has finally discovered that love was never something to hide. It was to live, to celebrate, and to be savoured. On the opposite side of town, another story of love and courage is unfolding. Gao, the girl who had been shunned and gossiped about before, sits now with Mr. Cho, their hands casually touching on the table together. There is no shame now in their love, no worry about being judged. It had taken some time, but her parents had come to accept her choice. They had realized that love has no age, appearance, or rigid constraints of convention. It's about connecting, about happiness. And after decades of living under the weight of what others thought, Gao is finally free. She had walked so much of her life along the path laid out for her, being the dutiful daughter, the perfect woman in the eyes of her parents and their world. But life had backed her into a corner where she had no choice but to fight for herself, and in fighting, she had found something she never expected, her own happiness, her own truth. As she runs a gentle hand over her swelling belly, her lips relax into a soft smile. She is embarking on a new phase of her life, one that is unsure, but one that is also full of love. She is no longer afraid of what the future holds. In Will's universe, the transformation is just as dramatic. The second time she visits her mother's apartment, there is a change. Gone is the walking around the truth, gone the concealing. Those unspoken words that had hung between them like an impassable wall have been replaced with unspoken understanding. Gao gives Will a knowing look prior to asking in her usual no-nonsense tone, "So, when do I get to have dinner with her?" Will blinks in surprise before laughter bubbles up from her chest. Her mother, for all her stubbornness, has always found a way to make room, even if she would never acknowledge it outright. "Soon," Will promises. No grand speech is necessary. No confrontation is needed any longer. This is Gao's method of accepting her daughter's happiness, of looking at her for what she is, and of stating that, after everything, she loves her. And that is sufficient for Will. As the days pass, life is not suddenly perfect. There are still adjustments to be made, conversations to be had, and moments of uncertainty. But through it all, Will and Vivien stand together. Their love is no longer something to be secretive about or to fear. It is something real, something tangible. And when they sit together in the park one evening, seeing the sun set the sky afire in gold and crimson hues, Will leans into Vivien, breathing in the gentle calm of the moment. "We made it," she whispers. Vivien squeezes her hand, smiling. Yeah, we did. Saving Face is more than a romance. It's a story of courage, of breaking past the expectations that define us, and of learning to embrace our truth, no matter the cost. Will's journey is one that resonates with anyone who has ever had to battle for their identity in the context of tradition. Her terror of letting her mother down, of being judged by her community, is something so many can relate to. But her evolution, from someone too scared to even receive her love in public to a woman declaring it for the world to hear, is a strong reminder that self-acceptance is not merely a matter of knowing who you are, but of having the strength to be that individual. Gao's story, too, is just as poignant. A woman who's lived her whole life playing by other people's rules, deciding to take love on her own terms, is just as revolutionary as Will's. She demonstrates that it's never too late to choose happiness, never too late to step beyond the lines of tradition and find a life that truly fulfills you. The movie beautifully explores the delicate balance of remaining loyal to where we're coming from and forging our own path. It does not demonize tradition, but rather shows it as something that evolves with us. The message is straightforward. We can be loyal to where we come from and not be against change. Saving Face is, at its simplest, a film about love. Not just romantic love, but the love between a mother and daughter, the love we have for ourselves, and the love we must fight for, even when the world insists that it's wrong. Ultimately, love isn't about other people's words. It's about what makes us alive. Even decades after its release, Saving Face remains a milestone for LGBTQ+ representation, particularly in Asian American films. At a time when mainstream media rarely addressed queer love stories with the sensitivity and truthfulness they deserved, this movie was a lifeline for those who wanted to see themselves on the screen. It is a film that deals with the universal struggle to live one's truth, a movie that reminds us that even when fear and tradition may try to hold us back, love, when courageously chosen, can overcome anything. Will and Vivian's love story is not just the story of two women finding one another. It is the story of the power of choosing oneself, of struggling for happiness, and of realizing that love, no matter what, is always worth the risk. That's a wrap. If you enjoyed this recap, don't forget to like and subscribe for more feel-good movie summaries. But before you go, ask yourself, what would you do if fear weren't holding you back? Because sometimes the hardest thing about love is not finding it, but choosing it, fully, fearlessly, and without apology. See you again here on Sapphic Nook.